Hello children. So Max Marx is here with the next chapter, Indigo by Louis Fisher. Now you need to have little information about the author. Reason being is that we do get some questions based on the author. So you must have little information about the author. Louis Fisher is a writer born in Philadelphia. Now he served as a volunteer in the British Army between 1918 and 1920. The years you may not, not very compulsory to memorize the years, but just that, Louis Fisher, born in Philadelphia. Then he made a career as a journalist and he wrote for the New York Times, the Saturday Review, and for European, Asian publications. He was also a member of the faculty at the Princeton University. Now this again, you need to know, he was a member of the faculty at the Princeton University. The following is an excerpt from his book, The Life of Mahatma Gandhi. Here you may get a question, an MCQ. Now the book has been reviewed as one of the best books ever written on Gandhi by Times Educational Supplement. Fine? The information is clear. Louis Fisher, born in Philadelphia, volunteer in the British Army, then also a member of the faculty at Princeton University. Then the main answer, the main point, the life of Mahatma. The chapter, this excerpt is from this book, The Life of Mahatma Gandhi. Next we move on to is now we talk about the summary. Indigo portrays Gandhi's struggle for the poor peasants of Champaran district. Now the poor peasants were sharecroppers with the British planters in an agreement. As per the agreement, the peasants had to grow indigo on the land, which was only 15%. It was to be given as rent to the British planters. Now, just a little beginning here. Now, Rajkumar Shukla, who is the main character, he goes to Gandhiji while he was there in the Congress session. He goes up to him and he requests him to come and help the sharecropper. Gandhiji had never heard of this place. He had never heard of Champaran. But then Rajkumar Shukla was determined. He persisted, insisted upon Gandhiji to accompany him to Champaran. Now Gandhiji, he followed him everywhere. Gandhiji was impressed by his persistence. And he told him, all right, I will be in Calcutta on such and such date. And from here, we'll go together. Now, when they went together, they went to Patna. And where did they go there? They went to Rajendra Prasad's house. And there, Gandhiji was treated as a poor sharecropper. Reason, Rajkumar Shukla was with him. So they had seen Rajkumar Shukla coming to their house to help the asking Rajendra Prasad to help the sharecroppers. And there he was not allowed to draw water from the well and he was made to stay on the ground. It was here Gandhiji saw that he saw the intensity of untouchability. Now then we move on to is, okay, it was to be given as rent to the British planters. What? The 15% indigo that was planted and that harvest was used as rent In this way, the poor sharecroppers were exploited. In 1917, synthetic indigo was developed by Germany, and the British planters thought that there was no need of indigo crop. So now these poor people who had been giving indigo as rent, they were suddenly asked that you don't have to give rent, you don't have to give the harvest of indigo, you give us compensation. So the Britishers demanded compensation from them to be released. Now the poor sharecroppers, they were not aware of this. They were not aware that the Germany had developed synthetic indigo. So they signed the agreements. Now they signed the agreements, but now as the poor peasants were uneducated and illiterate, they agreed. They agreed to it simply. However, some sharecroppers refused to sign the agreement, and they had to engage lawyers to counter the proceeding. Now, on the request of Rajkumar Shukla, a champion appeared named Gandhiji in district of Champaran. Now, it was a long battle. Gandhiji fought a long battle for about 1 year for the poor peasants of Champaran and managed to get justice for the peasants. Now, Rajkumar Shukla was a poor illiterate peasant, and just on his request, Gandhiji's entire year was consumed in Champaran. But that again was a turning point in Gandhiji's life. Now the battle of Gandhiji for the peasants developed courage in them. Gandhiji was able to teach them a lesson, and he was able to build courage in the sharecroppers. Even they realized that they had their rights and they had defenders. So Gandhiji was able to build courage in the peasants. There was no fear left in them. They were no longer dreaded. The peasants learned that they had rights and there were people to defend their rights. Now this you must remember. This you must remember. What change did Gandhiji bring in the condition of sharecroppers? Now, while he was fighting for their cause, he was able to build, he was able to make the peasants realize that they had their rights and there were people to defend their rights. Now, within few years, the British planters abandoned their estates. Now, these estates went back to the poor sharecroppers and this disappeared. Now, when it disappeared, Gandhiji's job was over because Rajkumar Shukla had insisted and had got Gandhiji to Champaran only with this purpose, to help them with the indigo sharecropping. And here Gandhiji had done justice to them. But then he did not leave. The reason why he did not leave is because he wanted to do something to remove their cultural and social backwardness. Now, for the social and cultural backwardness, which he had noticed over there, he formed a team. He wanted people to volunteer with him, and the people who volunteered with him were Mahadev Desai, you'll have to remember the names, and make sure you know the spellings as well. Narhari Parekh, along with their wives, they worked as volunteers. Then Gandhiji's youngest son, Devdas, his wife Kasturba Gandhi, she also came to help Gandhiji in his mission to remove cultural and social backwardness. Now, the first thing he did was for the education. For the education, primary schools were opened in 6 villages. Then we come to is, what role did Mrs. Gandhiji play in the cultural and social backwardness? Now, what she did was, she taught the ashram rules on personal cleanliness and community sanitation. You'll have to remember this, because these are textual words, and textual content always fetches you more marks. Next we come to is, what did he do for the health condition? For the health conditions, Gandhiji arranged a doctor. He arranged a doctor, and the doctor volunteered to provide his services for 6 months. Now, only 3 medicines were available. Just 3. Now, you'll have to remember the medicines, and you'll also have to remember the ailments, because this question frequently has been asked in the board exams earlier. So, because these questions happen to be important questions, you may find them again in your exam. Now, these 3 medicines were castor oil, quinine, and sulfur ointment. Now, remember one thing, castor oil was given in all 3 conditions. Now, somebody who showed a coated tongue was given a dose of castor oil. Somebody suffering from malaria fever was given castor oil plus quinine. Somebody suffering from skin eruptions, he was given a dose of castor oil plus sulfur ointment. So, these were 3 medicines and the 3 major ailments. Then we come to is, now when he was in Champaran, how did he manage his ashram? Now, when he was in Champaran, Gandhiji kept a long distance watch on the ashram. How did he do it? Number 1, he sent regular instructions by mail. And then he sent regular instructions by mail, and he was so far-sighted that once he had written a telegram to those ashram people that they must fill the old toilet holes and dig the new ones, as they must have started stinking. Then moving on with, the Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhiji's life. This again you need to remember. The Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhiji's life, because it was here he realized that the Britishers cannot order me in my own country. Now, he tried to mold a new India that was self-reliant, and he made India free. Then we come to his we're over with the summary, and we move on to the questions. Now, the summary was a brief summary. You need to go through the chapter properly. There's information about the lawyers, and then there is more detailed information, but that you can grasp it only when you have read your lesson properly. Now coming to the questions. The Maxx Marks has elaborately planned out the questions, the short questions, extract, long question, everything. But again, you need to be very regular with it. You need to spend at least 1 hour on English every day in order that you get good marks. So Maxx Marks will help you to get maximum marks. So that's how Maxx Marks comes up. Maximum marks is going to bring you. But then God helps those who help themselves. So you need to spend 1 hour with Maxx Marks to get you maximum marks, right? Okay. Now coming to the extract based questions. I'm reading out the extract to you. He appealed for teachers, Mahadev Desai and Narhari Parekh, two young men who had just joined Gandhi as disciples, and their wives volunteered for the work. Several more came from Bombay, Pune and other distant parts of the land. Devdas, Gandhi's youngest son, arrived from the ashram, and so did Mrs. Gandhi. Primary schools were opened in 6 villages. Kasturbai taught the ashram rules on personal cleanliness and community sanitation. Health conditions were miserable. Gandhi got a doctor to volunteer his services for 6 months. 3 medicines were available: castor oil, quinine and sulfur ointment. Anybody who showed a coated tongue was given a dose of castor oil. Anybody with malaria, fever received quinine plus castor oil. Anybody with skin eruptions received ointment plus castor oil. So you see, castor oil is given in all the ailments. Now, name the youngest son of Gandhi. Mahadev Desai? No. Narhari Parekh? No. So it has to be Devdas. Very clearly, it was written in extract, Gandhi's youngest son, Devdas, arrived from the ashram. So that's why I'm telling you, it's very important that you read the extracts. All your answers are lying in the extract. Maybe one you may have to think about, but otherwise most of the answers are in the extract. Next we move on to is, name the cities from which the volunteers arrived to assist Gandhi. So, will you be able to identify? Was it Bombay and Delhi? No. Then, Bombay and Pune? Yes. Very clearly it was mentioned that they arrived from Bombay and Pune. Next we move on to is, find out the synonym of student from the extract. They want it from the extract. There could be various other synonyms, but here the synonym has to be picked up from the extract. So, the synonym of student from the extract would be what? Could it be a teacher? No. Distant? No. Volunteers? No. Then, what could it be? Disciples. But is disciples there in this extract? No. So it has to be several more. All right. What were the lines? No? Mahadev Desai, Narhari Parekh, 2 young men along with their disciples. All right. So here we go. It is based on your extract. So you have to pick out the answer from your extract. Next we move on to it. The ailments were cured using which oil? Was there any mention of olive oil? Was there any mention of coconut oil? Onion? No. This was very clearly mentioned in the extract that the castor oil was given. Next we move on to is, did the British official commissioner advise Gandhi? Yes, they did advise him. What did they advise him? They advised him to leave Tirihut. Fine. Now this is not it. This is standalone MCQs. Now for the standalone MCQs, again, it is very essential that you go through your lesson properly. Only summary will not benefit you. You need to have your textual information, and it should be your NCERT textbook, Flamingo, where you would read your chapter, then you will read the summary, and then you will practice these standalone MCQs. Now these standalone MCQs can be handled by you only after reading the lesson, because see, even this, to proceed to Motihari, Gandhiji did not leave. Instead, now this is actually the next line. Instead, he proceeded to Motihari, where he used a house as headquarters and carried out his working. Then we move on to is, we have these open-ended questions. There are a large number of open-ended questions. Now in these open-ended questions, how was Gandhi treated at Rajendra Prasad's house? This again happens to be one of the important questions, and it has been asked in previous year's papers. Now, how was he treated? Gandhi came along with Rajkumar Shukla, who was a peasant, to Rajendra Prasad's house. Rajendra Prasad was well acquainted with Gandhiji, but he was not at home. Now, as Rajendra Prasad was not at home, and Gandhiji was a very simple person, he dressed up in simple clothes. Now, he was dressed very simply, so he was also treated as an untouchable peasant, like Rajkumar Shukla. Because the servants had seen Rajkumar Shukla coming to their house, so they thought he too was an untouchable peasant. Now, he was not allowed to draw water from the well, because if some drops fell from his bucket into the well, the entire well would get polluted. And he was made to stay on the ground. Now, coming to the long answer type questions. Now, see, if you are well acquainted with your chapter, and if you're familiar with the entire key words and the key sentences, then attempting the long answer will not be very difficult for you. You will easily manage. Now, why is the Champaran episode considered to be the beginning of the Indian struggle for independence? Now, the key points. Peasants were oppressed by their British landlords, but they lacked the courage to protest. Then, the peasants rose against the Britishers. Then finally, they won the battle. Now, freed themselves from sharecropping arrangement. Just one little information I'd share. Now, when Gandhiji had demanded refund for the money which the Britishers had illegally extorted from these sharecroppers. Now, Gandhiji wanted 50% of the refund, but when the time came, they agreed to refund only 25%. Now, Gandhiji agreed to this also. And the question we get in our exams is, why did he agreed to 25% refund? The reason why he agreed to 25% refund was because the money was less important. More important was they were made to surrender their prestige. That was more important. So that is why he had agreed to 25%, and thus the deadlock was broken. Okay, coming to this answer in detail. Now, why is the Champaran episode considered to be the beginning of the Indian struggle for independence? The peasants of Champaran were in great fear of the British government because they were forced to plant 15% of their holdings with indigo and surrender the entire produce to the landlord as rent. So this was the rent which was paid to the Britishers. Now, when synthetic indigo came, the landlords released them after demanding compensation from them. The innocent peasants agreed. They were not aware. They were simple people. So they did not know, and without realizing, they signed on the agreement. Later, the British hired men to oppose them. Now, those who had refused to sign the agreement, they had engaged lawyers, and to counter them, the Britishers had hired men. The word also used in our chapter is thugs. You could use that word also instead of men. Now, when Rajkumar Shukla told Gandhiji about it, Gandhiji visited Champaran and realized that the peasants were in great fear of the British. He had also chided the lawyers for collecting big fee from the sharecroppers. He says there's no use in taking their cases to the courts because these peasants, there's so much of fear in them that nothing will be done in their fear, nothing will be done in their favor. So important thing is to release them from their fear. Now he realized that it was necessary to rid them, free them of their fear. He started Satyagraha movement. The farmers shed their fear and supported. Gandhiji, by reaching the place of Satyagraha, that is why Champaran episode is considered to be the beginning of the Indian struggle for independence, as everyone realized that they can stand against the British, who could not order them around in their own country. Now, as far as these long answers are concerned, you cannot memorize them from one word to the end. But then you need to have these key points, and then you elaborate upon it. So with this, we conclude our lesson Indigo. Again, I'm saying it's important that you need to read your chapter followed by the summary and then the variety of questions which Maxx Marks provides you. You go through them, practice them, and then again you need to give 1 hour to your English every day. Apart from this, you must bring about slight improvement in your English every day, apart from your textbooks. That is, you pick up 5 words, 5 new words from Times of India, have a small copy or a small diary, and write down those words, write down their meanings, and make sure you use them. If you don't use them, they'll just remain where you've written them. You need to take them out from there. Take them out. Use them purposely with your friend, with your whoever is your buddy with whom you are talking and with whom you're interacting to improve your English. Fine? Right? Take care, stay blessed, stay happy.